Hi class, today we're going to talk about the value proposition. But before we continue onward, I know the question that's been on a lot of your minds. Dr. Cho, what's up with the hair? Well, the thing is, Dr. Cho is not a young man. And so this is my midlife crisis. Essentially, I decided, one, I don't want to chase after young girls. I'm very happy with my wife. Two, I don't want to drive fast cars because I know myself, if I got behind a fast car, I'd be dead in 6 months. So I had this boss once who was bald. He went bald in his 40s, and he said, I had crew cuts when I was young. If I knew this was going to happen, I would have let it grow out and enjoyed it. So what Dr. Cho has done is he grows his hair out. What I do is when it gets long enough, I cut it. I cut it and I donate it to women's breast cancer. They turn it into wigs and subsequently they sell the wigs. So that's kind of my little social entrepreneurship. Anyway, the biggest thing about when people look at products is what is the value? And the value is what kind of worth do we place on something? And that's the thing. A lot of people have ideas for products, but then you ask them, well, what is the value proposition? Why should I value this? And a lot of people don't have very good answers. What's the concept behind the value proposition? The thing is, we value three things. And this is what I mean by concepts. If you look at a book and talk about value propositions, they will give you 100 things to memorize. There is no way you're ever going to remember 100 things. But you have an outside shot of remembering three. We value three things. One is economic. Does it save me money? Two is emotion. How do I connect with my product? And three is utility. Does it make my life easier? And the thing is, they trade off against each other. Something might make my life easier. But if they say the price tag is $10,000, it's like, well, I don't value it that much. By the same token, I make fun of my daughter because she loves Apple. And anytime she shows the functionality of her Apple product, I show my Samsung, and it does exactly the same thing. But she has an emotional attachment to everything she has that's Apple. So the thing about the value proposition is it's one of the it defines parts of the 5 C's. And the thing it connects most with is customer need. The thing is, the value proposition is the way a customer connects with his product. The thing is, 42% of all startups fail just because they have bad value propositions. And so, again, when we talk about those drivers, it's functional, psychological. The thing about psychological or emotional is how do we go about choosing this thing? What is the brain process? And so this has to do with our inherent biases and our emotions. And we'll actually get into that. And of course, what is the cost benefit? The magnitude of how large these things matter a lot. Like, it might help you, it may not help you, but if the cost is like a quarter, it's like, yeah, what the heck, I'll take a shot at it. But again, if it's $25,000, I'm going to have to think hard about it, even if it's a no-brainer. In terms of utility and functionality, this is called the buyer utility matrix. And essentially what it does is it looks at the different parameters of how people value products, how convenient they are. Risk mitigation is, does it take away risk from me? For example, this is why you buy insurance. And essentially, what this matrix goes up against is your entire process through your ownership of a product. Meaning I purchase it, how's it going to be delivered, how's it going to maintain and support it. In certain cases, I have to worry about disposal. How am I going to get rid of it? If I'm talking about a chemical product, it might actually cost me money. And the usefulness of this matrix, though, is you can also use it to analyze your competition and see what they're doing. In terms of value parameters, For a product, we look at performance. Access is about locating and connecting. Um, and the thing about price is we want something that's fair. We want something that's consistent. For example, if it costs me $8 here, but over in New Mexico it costs $6, you're probably going to get pissed off. It's like, why is it so much cheaper over there? And also you want it to be reasonable. Uh, the thing about selling a product is, and this is why entrepreneurs, they always say, find the pain, find the pain. And the reason why, from the emotional point of view, it's much easier to sell a need, than it is to sell a want. So your two steps with a product is, first of all, I have to find the value. And then the next question is, but can I make money? There are plenty of products out there that'll have value, but if you can't make money, it's like, uh, the thing about, and this is where we get into a little interlude into conceptual thinking. And there's something I call the nature of things. And that's that if you understand the underlying rules of how something works, then you can figure out all the details and interaction, and you can figure out where the value is. And this is actually the nature of problem solving. The thing is, people look at things and they tend to ask what or who or how or whatever, but they don't dig into the question of why. And that's where you find the nature of things. The thing is, a product can have multiple values. And so instead of competing on the primary value, maybe the secondary value means a lot more. For example, in the biomedical business, I worked on electronic drug delivery systems, which are basically pumps. And everybody was thinking about accuracy, and everybody was thinking about cost. And those are two primary things to compete on. But what Dr. Cho did is he said, what is the second biggest thing that takes place in every hospital besides therapeutic? Data. A hospital creates a lot of data. So if we can make the system electronic that automatically data records patient records and everything else, all of a sudden this pump will stand out. The thing is, these secondary values can actually end up having more value than the primary values. An example is Southwest, that essentially when you look at the features of a standard airline with the hub and the assigned seating, first class and meals and everything else, what Southwest did is they changed the value proposition. They got rid of first class. They went point to point. And they revolutionized their business. And the reason why is because they found out that people didn't really care about meals and things like that. Now, in all fairness to the airlines, the reason why Southwest's model worked is because they were going short distances. If you were going coast to coast, you probably want a meal somewhere. You're going to value that. If you're going long distances, it's difficult. You're going to have to require very big airplanes, and this is why most of the airlines have different size planes, and Southwest only has one. Well, now you're going to need hubs, because your plane isn't going to be able to make it from point A to point B if it's a very, very long distance. And so all of a sudden now Southwest is becoming like the larger airlines. But the point is, they found an opportunity to participate in a new space. And what they were really competing against was driving your car. And that's where Herb Kelleher came up with these ideas. Context are those macro forces in the world that change everything. For example, when the black swan hit in 2008 and the entire economy crashed, if you wanted to raise money as a startup, forget it. And so typically context takes the form of social, economic, technology, global, cultural, and regulatory. Some context examples are like, for example, in China, they're valuing electric car development more than we are. And the reason why is they're concerned about pollution. What happens when their population becomes middle class and industrializes? They're all going to want cars, and they realize, look, we can't have them all be carbon producers. So they're looking at other things. Deregulation leads to new companies and new products because there's a total change in things. Technology is the simplest example of context change. Once technology comes in, total industries change. For example, you don't see travel agents anymore. Before, travel agents were the ones who held the power, and they had to make the arrangements. Now you can do it yourself. The thing is, products change over time. Originally, computers were just nerd tools, and now they're ubiquitous. They're part of everyday life. And even in education now, 14% of all college enrollees are doing it online, like you. But the thing is, it went from a geek tool to a portal of everything. The thing about context is you have to be careful about getting myopia, and that's when you look at your industry or things too closely, you miss the larger picture of things. And so you have to recognize that you have biases. You need to get beyond those biases. And here's an example. A shoe salesman in the Outback calls his office and says, "This is a terrible market. Nobody wears shoes." His competitor calls his office and he says, "This is a great market. Nobody wears shoes." So, who's right? This is a question for your discussion board for you to talk about in your groups. The thing is, when industries slow down, when you can think of new values and reinvent them. For example, watchmakers thought, okay, the watch industry is slowing down, and then it got reinvigorated by a company that says, look, fashion doesn't have to be high cost. Fashion can be low cost. They implemented plastics into watches, and that company is called Swatch. The U.S. steel industry collapsed. All this cheap steel coming in from South Korea and India and places like that were totally killing us. And so companies got out of the steel business. But then somebody realized, look, yes, they can produce steel cheaper than us, but they have to ship those tons of steel over an ocean. So what we are going to do is we're going to figure out the points in the United States that most use steel. Like, for example, Detroit uses a lot of steel. Places that have lots of construction use a lot of steel. And what they did is they set up small mills, mini mills. And so all of a sudden now, yes, their production costs were higher, but their transport costs were much, much lower. And that company was called Nucor Steel. And so they thrived. When you want to analyze a business, there's something called the value chain. And the value chain is just a sequence of activities a company goes through. And when you look at a value chain of an activity, you can see how things interact with each other and figure out, okay, well, how can I make certain steps in this process better? This is just a generic one of how companies work, starting from their supply chain all the way to their customer service. So if you're interested in like a specific business or something, you can look at their supply chain and see, okay, well, what costs the most? Again, the three things they value. Cost. Can I bring the cost down for them? Is there a potential to create an emotional attachment? For example, Intel. Intel components. Nobody, who makes resistors? Yeah, nobody knows. But the point is that what Intel did is by branding themselves, they went after the customer's customer. Now the customer of the computer maker is looking for Intel. And so that was a really novel thing that they had done to add value. And so essentially what Intel did is they looked at their value chain and says, look, it ends with our customer. We need to go beyond that. And then the third aspect, and so they took advantage of emotion through branding to be able to charge you more. And then the third aspect is utility. Look at each of these steps. Okay, well, which are really hard, and what can technology do to make that step easier? So, for example, I'm buying a book. What it used to be about before the internet came along is you went to a store, you had a limited selection of books. Maybe you bought something, then you went home. So buying a book actually took quite a bit of time. And so what Jeff Bezos did is he realized now with the internet and the fact that you don't have to have a physical store, that you can warehouse these things by warehousing it. Now all of a sudden Instead of paying all this expensive store space, which is why you can only have 5 like marketing books, he could have 1,000 marketing books. And so he addressed the issues that were a problem in the book space. And he realized that one of the other problems is that in terms of searching, are you going to read 1,000 titles of a book? No, but on a web page, he found out that you can scan through things very quickly. And that's why Jeff Bezos started Amazon. So in terms of value chains, look at the steps, figure out where the pain points are, and think about where do they fix problems. Now, one thing is innovations can actually cause new problems. For example, with drugs, yes, this drug solves this problem, but every drug has a side effect. And so the question is the solution, is the cure worse than what it's going to create? And of course, you have to make money. Here's an example of a product that tried to address the value chain. And what it is that when you eat mac and cheese, when it comes out, it's too hot. You have to wait for it. And so what they did is they made a bowl. It's just a hollow plastic bowl that you put water in, you freeze it. So when you pour out your mac and cheese, it's cool enough for you to eat. This was a dumb product. It was a dumb product for the simple reason it just didn't solve a significant problem. Yes, it addressed a problem. Yes, people's mac and cheese is too hot and it burns and they have to wait. But the point is that people have a solution to it. It's called convective cooling. And people would rather do that than have to go through the clumsiness of having to, and this is where the solution is worse than the pain itself, because now it's like you have to store this, you have to wash it out, you have to remember to fill it with water, it's going to take up freezer space. And so the cons outweigh the pros. On the other hand, there are lots of products out there that fix problems that people love, like the pasta fork or the barcode. The thing is, if it cost $1 for every barcode, nobody would have ever used it. But if it costs less than a cent to use a barcode, it adopts. And so that's the thing. This solution, how much is it worth? Is there a net gain for me? Another example of value chain is basketball. And I won't go through all this, but what it kind of comes down to is in order to get points, it's about number of possessions versus shooting percentage. And so what it comes down to is I either need a lot of possessions because they're multiplied together and I can get away with a bad shooting percentage, or I need a really good shooting percentage but I don't have a lot of possessions. And so the question is, how do I get possessions? I get possessions through steals and rebounds. And so that's the thing. You can look at what the driving facts are, and that's what you have to improve on. Okay, somebody's going to say you left out block shots. All right, I give you that too. And so the thing is, technology allows you to do a lot of different things. The thing about wireless is you're not pinned down. You now can do something when somebody's in motion before you couldn't do that. A microsensor gives you information. So with all this tech, you can apply this to problems. An example is the internet. And that's that what the internet allowed you to do is the warehouse no longer had to go through a middleman. They could sell straight to the consumer, the producer of a product. And so this greatly changed the way we sell things. And that's called disintermediation. And so when we look at, here's another example of a value chain, and that's that we look at through the pain point. Again, we're looking at the utility matrix, and so we look at concerns that we have versus solutions. And this is actually what Bezos went through when he formed Amazon, is that he looked at, okay, well, with somebody buying something, let's walk through the value chain. What's going to prevent them from buying things? And that's why they have such a liberal return policy, because it's like, well, returns, and especially they say, you have 3 weeks to return this or something like that. It puts pressure on you, and all of a sudden you perceive it as hassle and risk. And Amazon took that away. No questions asked, we'll take it back. Southwest Airlines. This was the secret to Southwest, and that's that when they went through their value chain analysis, you're talking about short flights which are 1 to 2 hours. The thing is, you burn an hour and a half on turning the gate around. When the plane comes in, getting the people off, getting more people on. And so if I can get more flights in per day, I can make more money. And that's what Herb Kelleher did. That was Southwest's secret. They turned their gates around quickly by getting rid of seating and everything else. Everybody just rush on the plane and take a seat. So they could get more flights in per day. And then his next step was to make those flights cheaper. And he did that by basically having one airplane. He picked an optimal size airplane with the best fuel economy. And so now all of a sudden you don't have to support 10 different airplanes with all the parts and everything else. If one airplane goes down, you could take one in the shop and use it to fix the other one, and so on and so forth. And so that's the thing. When you see well-run businesses, there's a reason why they're well-run. Again, when you look at the chain, you look at points of pain, and you look at where can tech innovation change something. And so that's the value proposition. The main thing to remember: utility, economy, and emotion. If you can touch one of those in a significant way, you have a value.